Hi, today we're diving into the best Souls-like game ever released by the legendary studio From Software. One of those titles surrounded by Sony's famous aura of elitism. And it's also the last true PlayStation exclusive that Sony fanboys cling on to with their dear lives. If you've spent the last 10 years living under the rock in the Bikini Bottom, and somehow haven't heard about Bloodborne, let me introduce you to the holy grail of all Souls-likes. A game so legendary, so universally praised, that literally every self-respecting genre fan without a console is dying to try it out on PC. But Sony, well known for being the most generous and gracious company in the entire world, right after Nintendo obviously, isn't exactly eager to give us a PC port. And they're not exactly rushing to improve anything even on their own damn console either. Remember the launch of the groundbreaking PS5, which had literally no games? Well, the PS4 had pretty much the same issue, except it also didn't even support backward compatibility. I clearly remember there being exactly two system sellers back then, the Order 8086 and Bloodborne. As someone who never owned a console before, naturally I missed out the PS4 release entirely. But as years went by, I eventually tried my first Souls-like game at a more conscious age, and man, I was hooked. I started devouring them one after another: Dark Souls 3, Dark Souls 1, Sekiro, and much later Elden Ring. By the way, I'm still hesitant to give Dark Souls 2 a shot. But lurking somewhere in the shadows all this time were Miyazaki's masterpieces that never made it to PC, specifically Bloodborne and Demon's Souls. I kept reading rave reviews about Bloodborne, seeing countless desperate pleas from fans begging for a PC port, and honestly, it sparked a wild curiosity in me. Because there is no way the entire internet and the Soulsborne fanbase were crying and praying for some mediocre-ass game, right? And then, one fateful day at the end of 2022, it finally happened. Right at the PS5 launch, and let me remind you, back then the shortage was absolutely insane. Getting your hands on that console was practically mission impossible. An unexpected stroke of luck came my way. My local tech store suddenly opened limited pre-orders for Sony's new console. This was an opportunity I simply could not let pass, so I grabbed it immediately. When the console finally arrived, my happiness knew no bounds. I blazed through Astra's Playroom, an amazing game by the way, thanks for the sequel Sony, God of War, Red Dead Redemption 2. I was enjoying all those great games I had missed out on earlier, and life was pretty amazing. But one intrusive thought kept gnawing at my mind. I saw that title I'd yearned for so long, and it was calling to me. But for some inexplicable reason, I kept delaying my dive into Bloodborne, always distracted by other games. New hype games kept coming out. Elden Ring alone consumed at least 200 hours of my life. Time marched on. I finished university, landed a job, moved abroad, got married. But Bloodborne, already purchased, kept staring back at me from my backlog, quietly asking me to finally give it a try. And then came 2025. One day my friends and I gathered at my place to watch Katowice finals for CS2. During a break between maps, one of my buddies casually asked, "Hey man, do you have Bloodborne on your console?" And just like that, the moment had arrived. 5 long years after getting my hands on the console, I finally installed Bloodborne. My friend played for a couple of hours, took down the first 2 bosses and confidently declared, "Dude, this game slaps. It's totally worth buying a console just for this." The next day, I turned on my console and spent a good 5 minutes staring blankly at Bloodborne's icon on the home screen. On one hand, I desperately wanted to finally dive into the world everyone had been praising for so long. Yet something kept holding me back. Finally, mustering all my willpower, I clicked on the icon. What happened next is hard to describe with words. I was sucked out of reality for dozens of hours. Only once before in my life had a game gripped me this intensely. But this time, I was completely lost in the world of Yharnam, unable to put the controller down or even think about anything else. And that's how my story with what's probably the greatest game From Software has ever made began. It's a story during which I finally understood why everyone is so desperate to see this masterpiece release on PC. A story that turned me into another voice among the thousands begging Sony for a remaster. A story how I became a hunter in the city of Yharnam, and how I shaped the fate of this incredible world. And here I am, writing these words literally right after defeating the game's final boss. So what can you even say about this magnificent game? The plot has been already dissected down to the smallest details. Every gameplay mechanic and boss has been explored extensively. And every self-respecting YouTuber has already dropped their video on Bloodborne. So what new can I possibly bring to the table? Today it won't be so much a review as just the personal ramblings of your typical obsessed fanboy. Oh, and one more quick lyrical digression. I'm no lore expert. I'll be sharing Bloodborne stories strictly from my own perspective. Plus, following the tradition of the Souls series, the lore here is quite patchy and open-ended. And since I'm not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, feel free to correct me down in the comments. Anyway, here's the deal. Once upon a time there was an ancient race called the Pthumerians. These were some hardcore dudes, strong, fast, badass, you get the picture. One day, while digging through the earth, they stumbled upon ancient labyrinths and encountered beings known as the Great Ones. The Great Ones here are clearly inspired by Lovecraft's cosmic gods. These unknowable eldritch entities who've basically uncovered cosmic truths. Anyway, the Pthumerians started serving these Great Ones, who turn out to have some peculiar habits, like needing to reproduce. But in the world of Bloodborne there is one sacred rule. Every Great One loses a child, and then yearns for a surrogate. And as it turns out, one of these Great Ones decided to hop with a Pthumerian queen named Yharnam. As you would expect, this marriage didn't exactly end in a happily ever after, because the Great Ones always lose their children. That's exactly what happened with Yharnam's child. Besides that, the Great Ones told the Pthumerians the ritual known as blood ministration. Basically, they would inject themselves with the Great One's blood, becoming faster, taller, stronger, and presumably gaining a few extra inches down there too. Long story short, after these blood transfusions, they turned into absolute gigachats. But when they reused the same needle for the 15th time, shit started hitting the fan. They developed some blood disease and, well, it was basically game over. Fast forward many years and humans arrived at those lands, building their city directly above the ancient labyrinths of the Great Ones. By this time, most Great Ones had already abandoned the labyrinths. Almost all of them. But we'll get back to that later. Eventually, humans figured it out, this magical blood could be injected into themselves as well. As a result, they learned to cure even the most serious diseases like tuberculosis and TikTok addiction. Soon enough, Yharnam became the tourist capital of the world, attracting visitors eager to inject themselves with that sweet, sweet magical blood. And that's exactly why our protagonist ended up here, to try some of that famous blood. After signing a contract, we received a transfusion, had a couple of fucked up hallucinations, and finally woke up. Right after waking up, we get our asses absolutely handed to us by the very first mob, and promptly find ourselves on the street of Yharnam. And holy shit, Yharnam is gorgeous. Once again, Miyazaki and his team crafted a location so stunning at first glance that it literally takes your breath away. Too bad this is usually balanced out later by another poison swamp or some shit. After running to a lantern with some creepy little dudes, we teleport into the Hunter's Dream. A weird dimension where we meet Gehrman, the first hunter. Another badass grandpa who, despite being older than dirt, could still easily carve your face off. He goes, "Feel free to make yourself at home. Mi casa su casa. Use whatever you want." Then leans in and creepily whispers,
"Even the dog, should it please you."
What do you mean by that?
Though we can't use the doll just yet, since our sanity is still intact. The first logical thing you would probably ask is,
Oh, Jesus! What the hell's going on? I mean, what the hell is going on?
allow me to explain. When the people of Yharnam started guzzling blood by the gallon, they naturally doomed themselves. Just like the Pthumerians before, the citizens got infected by a plague, transforming them into grotesque monsters. The first to say enough is enough was Gehrman himself, the original hunter. Grandpa set up his secret bachelor pad, the Hunter's Workshop, designing specialized hunter weapons, like the ones those little creeps offer us on our first visit, and started training hunters to fight these beasts. But after some tragic events, Gehrman mysteriously disappeared from Yharnam, and no one knew where he had gone. Turns out he's here, in the Hunter's Dream, filling us in on the situation. "It's hunting season," he says. "Grab yourself a weapon, hunter, and go kick some ass in the cities of this nightmare can end." By the way, we are now the bearer of the Hunter's Mark, and this mark makes us effectively immortal. After death, we respawn at the nearest lantern. There is only one way to permanently die, but I will save that reveal for later. Thus begins our career as a hunter. Yharnam streets are filled with filthy hobos who'll stomp your ass if you get overconfident. But that hardly reduces the thrill of exploring the city. For a while, I just enjoyed the hunting, though I doubt those homeless bastards were exactly who German had in mind. I explored it deeper, met new characters, and unlocked shortcuts that made life much easier. At some point I realized I have been exploring forever, killed countless creatures, but still hadn't found the next checkpoint. And here is the kicker. I could have just kept going indefinitely. To me, this is one of Bloodborne's defining differences from other Souls games. Lanterns are not bonfires, sites of grace, or idols. You can't rest or heal at them. They just teleport you back to the hub and serve as the respawn points. This freedom from checkpoints drastically enhances exploration. It stops feeling like a brief raids. You can spend hours wandering, looting shiny things and harassing wildlife, which brings me to another neat detail. After death, your dropped souls, or blood echoes, can either lie around or end up swallowed by some enemy. You can just run past, scoop them up, and dash off. No, if you had a lot of souls, prepare for a fight. I don't recall other From Software games doing this, but it's pretty damn cool in my opinion. However, I exaggerated the endless exploration beat slightly. Your weapon can break, and since there is no item for field repairs, you'll have to return to the workshop every time. Compared to Dark Souls 3, lanterns here are scarce as hell. Those From Software's trademark level design, tons of interconnected space revolving around a single lantern, shines brilliantly here. Your constant "where the fuck am I?" regularly transforms into a satisfying "holy shit, I know this place." Unfortunately, this also retains one of the biggest downsides from the original Souls games: annoyingly long run backs to bosses. This makes each boss attempt precious, because who wants to run all the way back again? And the game clearly isn't designed expecting constant deaths, given the healing items and bullets don't replenish automatically. They're finite consumables. Good news, they're easy to farm. Bad news, you'll actually need to farm them occasionally. In a typical playthrough, regular enemies drop enough to sustain you, but some areas rarely drop heals. Thankfully, the game generously set a high cap of 20 heals from the start, which can be increased later, making the issue less annoying than it sounds. Another topic I would like to touch upon right away, so we don't have to circle back later, is Bloodborne's gameplay. I don't know about now, but back in the day, the community loved to joke that From Software was basically making the same Dark Souls over and over again. You know, this is Dark Souls in Japan, this is Dark Souls in Birmingham. But that's fundamentally not true, and frankly, I'm not even sure how to clearly label that core thing separating Bloodborne from its predecessor. It's complex, nuanced. So let me put it simply. The aesthetic is different, the game design is different. What game expects from you is completely different. If in Dark Souls you're literally some nameless loser, just a worthless nobody from the ass end of nowhere, and suddenly you're told, "Hey, turns out you're the chosen undead. Go save our world, please." And now you must navigate locations filled with monsters vastly superior to you. And Bloodborne flips this idea entirely. Yes, again, you control some unknown schmuck, but you survive the blood transfusion and the patronage of German himself, the legendary first hunter. The game snatches your comfy shield away, handing you a pistol instead. Bloodborne hammers home a single idea. You're not locked in with these monsters, they're locked in with you. And the gameplay mechanics and pacing reinforce this dramatically. First, we've got riposts, similar to Dark Souls parrying, but instead of a shield, you stun enemies with your pistol. And more importantly, there is a local vampirism mechanic. Whenever an enemy smacks you down, you have a brief window to counterattack and regain a portion of your lost health. Honestly, this mechanic is so damn good that sometimes I completely forgot about healing items. Before experiencing it myself, I didn't realize just how insanely satisfying this mechanic could be. Neither Millennia's Rune nor the blocks from Lies of P feels as rewarding. You literally feel the rush when striking back. This feature pushes you into an aggressive playstyle, rewarding risky exchanges. In Dark Souls, trading hits was usually reserved for over-level characters, but here it's core gameplay. Simply put, In Dark Souls, you are struggling nobody. In Bloodborne, you're a hunter, and your sole job is to obliterate your prey. Right from the beginning, Bloodborne introduces to its own unique style and fashion. You're not a knight, a bandit or a pyromancer. You're a stylish aristocratic hunter, tracking and dancing around your prey. And you do it with elegance, using your sophisticated professional weapon, or rather say, instrument. Speaking of these instruments, finally, in Miyazaki's game, I wasn't worried about the damage numbers or min-maxing my build around a weapon. All I cared about was how stylish and refined my weapon was. Going through a Dark Souls game with your starter weapon might feel stupid, but here it's completely viable. Why did I spend the entire game using the Soul Cleaver? Because it gave me exactly what I need. Fast attacks when folded, and long, sweeping strikes when unfolded, allowing perfect control over enemy distances. Moreover, you can carry 2 main weapons, essentially giving you 4 configurations you can quickly switch between. And no need to worry about fetrals here, there is no weight mechanic in Bloodborne. This is a matter of taste, but dashing instead of rolling just feels snappy and more elegant. So, in short, Bloodborne doesn't let you become a hulking, over-leveled tank. Instead, it asks you to become an elegant, professional hunter. But let's get back to the story. Initially, 2 bosses await us, the Cleric Beast, which is optional, and Father Gascoigne, the first mandatory boss. There is a touching local storyline involving him. While exploring the first area, you can encounter a little girl speaking from a window. She gives you a music box, saying her mother has gone missing searching for her father, who also vanished. Her father loved the tune, and she hopes playing it might help us to find him quicker. As you have probably guessed, Father Gascoigne is her dad. During the fight with him, using the music box can stun him briefly, as if Gascoigne's humanity is battling his beastly nature. After the battle, on the same area, we find a dead woman holding a brooch, exactly as described by the girl. Gascoigne, in his frenzy, apparently killed his own wife. After defeating Gascoigne and the Cleric Beast, paths to the Old Yharnam and Cathedral Ward open. We begin with Old Yharnam, an interesting place filled with hunters who protect monsters. On a rooftop stands Jura, a legendary hunter, greeting you warmly, with a machine gun to your face. The deal is this: when the plague erupted in Old Yharnam, Jura was tasked with burning it down. But feeling compassion for the monsters, who were once human, he stayed behind. You can even befriend him, but the process is so convoluted that honestly, fuck it. Despite how cool Jura is, I couldn't manage to befriend him, nor did I care to. After beating the main boss of the location, Blood-Starved Beast, we head to the Cathedral Ward, ultimately facing Vicar Amelia, an incredibly stylish boss by the way. After defeating her, we find the Skull of Lawrence, triggering a flashback with the cryptic phrase,
"Fear the old blood."
This phrase unlocks our next location. However, I reached that locked door before defeating Amelia and got completely lost afterward. I scoured every corner, found secrets, but had no idea where to go next. Maybe it's my stupidity? I'm not the brightest, let's be honest, but Bloodborne's interconnected level design can easily confuse newcomers. So, having said the password and opened the door, we have 2 paths available: Hemwick Charnel Lane and the forest. There is not much to say about Hemwick, it's just a place where absolute trash lived and mass burials took place during the plague. The local boss is the Witch of Hemwick, an old hack whose ass we promptly slice off very quickly. But there is the forest. Oh god, the forest. Remember when I said that Miyazaki balances out gorgeous Yharnam with a shitty location later on, just so you won't relax and fully grasp the genius of this Japanese anime fanatic? Well, here it is. The forest is a confusing maze filled with extremely unpleasant enemies. Eventually, we face the shadows of Yharnam, who serve as a personal bodyguards to Queen Yharnam herself. After defeating them, we arrive at the Byrgenwerth College. Its rector is Willem, whom we saw in the flashback after defeating Vicar Amelia. This university gathered many talented individuals, one of whom was Carol, who deciphered the Great One's speech into runes that we actually use in gameplay to enhance our abilities. So Willem was obsessed with ascension, believing humans to be primitive and aspiring to the greatness of the Great Ones. Underneath Yharnam, they found old labyrinths where Willem sent students on expeditions. Some lost their minds, others never returned, and a few brought back strange artifacts. Eventually they discovered something, or someone, down there. Through these labyrinths, humans discovered blood transfusion rituals of the Great Ones. Lawrence, William's student, declared this blood divine and began popularizing it among the masses. However, William foresaw that meddling with blood wouldn't end well and wasn't interested in healing people as well. This disagreement led to a split. Lawrence founded the Healing Church, essentially taking control of Yharnam and turning it into a tourist attraction through blood transfusions. Meanwhile, William pursued his own path, concluding that ascension required eyes. Literally, believing humans lacked eyes, he began cultivating them in jars and experimenting on students, growing eyes on their brains. He also discovered an artifact, the umbilical cord of a Great One, capable of growing eyes within a human. His experiments culminated with a student named Rom. At Byrgenwerth, we meet William, who silently gestures toward the sea. Diving in, we encounter Rom, the Vacuous Spider. So William had successfully turned his student into a kin. And a quick lore note, besides Great Ones, Bloodborne has kin, artificially created beings, distinct from naturally born Great Ones. Surprisingly, this unassuming boss was the first to kick my ass thoroughly. Rom was the only boss in the game that even made me rage quit. Repeatedly, I reached second phase, only to die due to my stupidity or greed. She herself is nothing special, a passive lump at the bottom of the sea, spawning spiders and occasionally casting magic. But the spiders she spawn are deadly and can even one-shot you if you're reckless. You could try killing them, but then Rom unleashes devastating magic right into your face while you're distracted. In short, an utterly disgusting boss, and the first to genuinely challenge me in the game. Killing Rom reveals something terrifying. After her death, we see Queen Yharnam silently staring at the moon, which has turned blood red. Afterward, we're teleported back to Yharnam, unlocking the previously sealed door leading to Yahar'gul. Now we also start noticing spider-like creatures perched atop buildings. Interestingly enough, these creatures had been here from the game's very beginning. These beings are known as Amygdala, a Great One who cast multiple projections of itself across the city to observe. However, we can only perceive them after obtaining a certain level of insight, a measure of our character's madness. According to Lovecraftian mythos, elder gods comprehend so much cosmic truth, so their consciousness exists on an entirely different plane. Humans to them were akin to how we view ants. Every time a human approached the cosmic truth, their mind simply shuddered. The human brain just wasn't capable of comprehending such knowledge. As our insight gradually increases throughout the game, we begin to witness increasingly more strange things. First, the doll in the hunter's dream comes to life. Then we start seeing Amygdala clearly, and then at 60 insight, we can hear a child's cry. Returning to Yahar'gul, what makes this village so important? Here we find the School of Menses, founded by a peculiar character named Mikolash, once another student of William. His followers similarly studied blood, the Great Ones and so forth, but secretly, they foolishly attempted direct contact with the Great Ones, specifically Amygdala, whom they literally worshipped. During these attempts, they performed horrific rituals on humans, ultimately creating the grotesque monstrosity known as the One Reborn, a huge, acetylene mass of human remains fused together. It's a particularly disgusting boss whose body parts explode to deal damage, casts a rain of corpse, and is also supported by obnoxious mages, firing magic from the rooftops. After defeating the One Reborn, we finally gain access to the School of Menses itself, which is utterly deserted. We find countless student corpses wearing strange helmets, presumably their own twisted version of tinfoil hats intended to communicate with the Great Ones. During one such of Discord calls with the cosmic beings, they were all abruptly pulled into a nightmare realm. All these dreams and nightmares are actually otherworldly dimensions inhabited by Great Ones. Mikolash, however, was basically pranked by these Great Ones. During one of their chats, Mikolash and his students were dragged into a nightmare, but hilariously enough, it wasn't Amygdala's nightmare, but that's of another Great One. Obviously terrified, they immediately tried to reach out again to Amygdala for answers, but instead, another great one, the brain of Mensis, was thrown into the nightmare, instantly driving all students insane. So now, only Mikolash remains, endlessly running around, desperately calling out to Amygdala and someone named Kos. We finally catch up to him and deliver an absolute beating. In my playthrough, Mikolash went down the first try, but holy hell, he's an incredibly obnoxious boss. First, this guy constantly runs around the arena, teleporting between different parts. Once you corner him a couple of times, you find yourself trapped with him in a small room, where he starts casting his exploding diarrhea zucchini attack that almost one-shots you straight to hell.
What the fuck?
Before we move to the finale, let's cover some other important points, particularly the DLC, the Old Hunter, which I absolutely adore, and various secrets hidden throughout Bloodborne. Starting with secrets, a typical player might finish the game while completely missing two massive areas packed with lore and unique bosses. The first is the Upper Cathedral Ward, which introduces some seriously body horror vibes. Bloodborne's atmosphere isn't exactly warm and welcoming in general, but the Upper Cathedral Ward is straight up fucked. It's pitch dark, full of little enemies jumping at you from shadows, and even has monsters capable of draining you inside, a highly valuable resource. After surviving this charming location, we emerge onto a peaceful flower-filled meadow, inhabited by blue mushroom-like creatures we've encountered before. However, killing those innocent-looking creatures actually means murdering the children who underwent horrific experiments by the church, infused with the blood of a Great One. The Great One was taken from the labyrinths below and worshipped by the church. Defeating these mushrooms reveals an elevator leading down to a dungeon housing Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos. She is believed by some to be the Great One, whose blood was widely distributed throughout the city. Ebrietas herself is incredibly nasty, lots of health, massive damage output, and she constantly shifts positions, making her one of the toughest bosses in the main game. Another fascinating location is Iosefka's clinic, where we initially wake up. Behind a locked door, we find Iosefka, a seemingly kind-hearted woman who encouraged us to send any survivors her way for safety. Ironically, the true safe haven is actually with a sketchy-looking pilgrim in the Cathedral Ward. The original, genuinely kind Iosefka is killed early on by an imposter who takes over her identity and conducts twisted experiments, attempting to turn humans into kin. Anyone who sends her ends up being one of those little alien-headed creatures we've encountered before. Exploring further, we find a note inviting us to the Cainhurst Castle, promising an Uber premium to pick us up. And indeed, upon reaching the designated spot, we've transported to a snow-covered castle. Cainhurst Castle was home to aristocrats and nobles who conflicted with the healing church over different blood rituals, particularly vile blood, turning inhabitants into vampire-like creatures. This conflict ended violently, with the church sending executioners to slaughter the castle's occupants. There is another theory. Cainhurst opposed the church's obsession, prompting them to send Lady Maria, who is a relative of the queen, with corrupted blood, turning the castle's residents into monsters, after which the executioners finished the job. After the massacre, the church faced a new issue. Queen Annalise, infused with the vile blood, became literally immortal. Executioner Logarius hid her chamber behind an illusion using the Crown of Illusions. Since then, he stood guard in the freezing cold, and actually he's a pretty cool boss overall. So I invite you to enjoy this MLG moment of me repeatedly parrying him at the brink of death like an absolute pro. I would say he's decent as a boss, though his second phase is a literal nightmare. These are the major secrets in Bloodborne I wanted to cover, though I'm positive my first playthrough missed a ton of other hidden secrets, quests, character and events. This game's world is massive, and I'm sure I haven't discovered even half of what Bloodborne has to offer to me. So let's finally turn to the last page of this long story, the DLC, the Old Hunters. We're transported there by a projection of Amygdala, landing us in the Hunter's Nightmare. This place has trapped countless hunters over time. Some enemy groups will even panic upon seeing you, having been repeatedly slaughtered by these hunters stuck in the nightmare. Initially, it's unclear whose nightmare this is exactly. Here, we will encounter nearly every significant character from the Bloodborne's lore. Vicar Lawrence deserves special mention. He's one of the two bosses, along with Dark Beast Parle, that I absolutely despise. Lauren seriously tested my patience with his perfectly readable attacks and absolutely wild camera spinning in circles. Thankfully, he's an optional DLC boss. The first mandatory boss of this DLC, however, is much more interesting. Progressing through the area, we come across a mountain of corpses and find Ludwig, the Holy Blade, now transformed in a grotesque beast. A small historical note. After the university split, two significant figures stood ready to counter the looming chaos: German, the first hunter, and Ludwig. The church decided it required its own army, leading to the formation of a regiment of holy knights led by Ludwig, the first Holy Blade. The difference between Ludwig knights and German's hunters lay in their approach. German trained agile, precise hunters, whereas Ludwig led a squad of berserkers, wielding massive swords and annihilating all monstrosities head-on in the street. There is no definitive information, but it seems he died and was pulled into this nightmare, forced to exist among the corpses of all Yharnam citizens, people whose deaths he himself contributed to. Now, having lost his sanity, he resembles the monstrous horse from Berserk. After reducing his health halfway, he regains a semblance of his humanity and draws his legendary holy sword. Ludwig is incredibly resilient and fast, making our battle immensely enjoyable. Upon defeating him, the only thing he asks is whether other church hunters became valiant warriors, as he'd hoped. The next location is the research hall, where horrific experiments were conducted to transform humans and children into kin. Everywhere we see tragic individuals, driven mad by these experiments. Climbing to the top of the tower and defeating a rather annoying boss, we finally encounter Lady Maria in the astral clock tower. Lady Maria was essentially German's first disciple, who deeply admired him. Together, they hunted beasts until the infamous Fishing Hamlet incident. And Bloodborne lore here gets fuzzy and contradictory as usual. It seems the church sent hunters there to investigate strange occurrences, yet somehow German and Maria ended up there too. What matters is that they found Kos, a great one previously mentioned by Mikolash. The villagers worshipped Kos, but all became monstrous sea creatures due to the parasites contained in Kos' blood. German and Maria didn't just kill Kos, they cut open her belly, extracting a child, and surprisingly human-like child. After condemning the village to extinction, Maria, overwhelmed by guilt, threw her weapon down a well and took her own life. German, devastated, crafted a doll strikingly resembling Maria. He soon vanished, resurfacing only in Hunter's dream alongside the living doll. In the nightmare, Maria guards the entrance to the fishing hamlet, and the battle against her is absolutely incredible. A duel between two equally skilled hunters, two of German's disciples. While not overly difficult, and even someone as unskilled as me defeating her in my second attempt, it remains one of the most satisfying fights in Bloodborne, and I would even replay the DLC repeatedly just for this fight. After defeating Maria, we finally reach the fishing hamlet, seeing the transformed villagers worshipping Kos. At the village's end, we find Kos' corpse, and from her sliced belly crawls a humanoid creature, an umbilical cord wrapped around it, wielding a strange weapon, likely a placenta. Initially, it seems non-threatening, but don't be fooled. This is supposedly the hardest boss in the entire game, at least according to the Bloodborne community. And here let me take a moment to talk about difficulty. A few bosses in my life have completely drained my soul and sanity. Bosses that live in my hand rent-free while I cook dinner or lay in bed. Bosses that made me binge-watch YouTube guides for strategies and tactics. The first of those was the Dancer from Dark Souls 3. A boss that obsessed me so much that my old apartment desk still has a crack from the way I slammed it with my fist after yet another death. The second one was Ishin Ashina from Sekiro. I even made a video about this, check it out if you're curious. I spent at least 3 full days on that guy, but beating him made me a better version of myself. I realized that no matter how impossible something seems, I can overcome it through sheer determination and effort. I would also put Malini in the same category, but I don't think I need to say much about her, you know everything yourself. So naturally I heard Bloodborne has a few nightmare tier bosses as well. But here's the catch. Ludwig the Holy Blade died on the first try. Lady Maria, she was hyped as the Bloodborne Sister Frida version, and she was down on the second attempt. And then I came to the infamous Orphan of Kos, and honestly, I was disappointed. Everyone described him as a relentless freak of a boss, an aggressive, unrelated juggernaut who doesn't give you a second to breathe. Someone so unhinged and punishing that even if you came in overleveled, he would still wreck you. And for sure, he wasn't as easy as Maria was. He had some pretty nasty moves. That one where he launched into the air, spams projectiles and then slams down with some ungodly damage? Yeah, that sucked. But here's the thing. He was marketed as a hyperboss, one who would sit next to Ishin Ashina and the dancer in my Hall of Mental Trauma. That didn't happen though. I don't remember exactly how many tries it took, maybe 6 or 7, but it was quick. And never once did I have that awful creeping thought, he's unbeatable, I can't do this. No, every time I died, he had maybe 20% health left, and I knew it was my fault. Either I got greedy or I messed up. I'll admit, phase 2 is the complete chaos. He goes feral, his attacks pattern become totally random, and if you get caught in the combo, you're dead in a second. But even then, the dancer felt scarier. Maybe it's because I reached the DLC right before the final boss, and I was simply too strong, I don't know. But let me tell you that the average enemies in the village, and especially those anchor-wielding bastards, gave me way more trouble than Orphan did. This didn't feel like a stomp by over-leveled god, it felt fair. And eventually, I defeated the Orphan of Kos on the beach, and saw its spirit lingering. You can actually disperse that spirit, granting the orphan peace and finally bringing it down to the nightmare. Now, with a clear conscience, we can move to the finale of Bloodborne's main story. After defeating Mikolash, the path to the Nightmare Summit opens, and on the way here, we see Queen Yharnam standing still, gazing silently toward the top. At the summit, we face Mergo's wet nurse. Just to clarify, Mergo is the child, not the nurse. The wet nurse protects this invisible infant, whom we only identify by the note and cry we've heard throughout the game. Personally, I didn't find the boss particularly compelling. She waves some blades around, and in the second phase she spawns shadow clones. That's about it. Upon defeating her, we receive a third of the unbiblical core, but more on that later. Returning to the Hunter's Dream, we find the workshop in flames. German greets us, congratulates us, and tells us the hunt is over, and this is where we make a choice. Accept his offer, or refuse. If you accept, German chops off your head and you wake up in the dawn in Yharnam, free at last. And if you refuse, the old man rises from his wheelchair, draws his weapon, and proceeds to beat the shit out of you, to show you how wrong your decision was. And honestly, he's a damn good final boss, though not quite Ishin from Sekiro. The fight with German radiates the gravitas of the legendary old hunter, the man who started it all. More than anything, this fight is about granting German peace. Like us, he bears the hunter's mark, which allows him to endlessly respawn in the dream after death. But here is the loophole. Only another bearer of the mark can kill him for good. Once German falls, the Great One, the Moon Present, descends. And it's the entity that recruited German and kept him trapped in this eternal cycle. We've heard German mutter about how tired he is, about his longing to escape, but the Moon Present never let him go. William had already suspected this. Rome, whom we fought in the lake, was a barrier holding the moon back. In this ending, the Moon Presence appoints us as the new German, the next caretaker of the Hunter's Dream, welcoming new hunters to the nightmare. Unless... umbilical cords. Scattered across the game are 4 umbilical cords. We need 3 of them, or 3/3, to form a whole. If we consume all 3, we gain immense insight and become closer to the Great Ones. This makes us immune to the Moon Presence influence, and then it attacks. As a boss, well, it's fine. Not amazing, but decent. A mid-tier Great One with one particularly nasty attack.
What the fuck?
After defeating the Moon Presence, we see the doll gently picks up a small worm from the ground, calling it.
Oh, good hunter.
And there is one fascinating theory. This ending might be the true one. Well, some believe the doll is not just a replica of Lady Maria crafted by German. She might be the Great One herself, an ancient being from the Nightmare realms long before German's time. Evidence of this lies in her mysterious blood manipulation abilities. She's been subtly nurturing and evolving us the entire game. And in the true ending, we not only free German, but ascend ourselves. We defeat the moon presence, we become a great one. The doll calls us her child, the first great one's child who wasn't lost, who doesn't need to be replaced. So, a few final thoughts on Bloodborne. Honestly, I'm blown away. In my personal ranking of From Software games, Bloodborne absolutely sits at the top, sharing the throne with Sekiro. I get why people call this the best From Software games in recent years. And it's not just about the hype or the fact that it's been locked behind the PlayStation Vault for so long, while PlayStation fanboys use it to troll PC players. No, this is truly a magnificent game. Everything here is crafted with mastery. The world design is top tier, just like in the first Dark Souls. Bloodborne oozes style, and this style permits everything, from the weapon to the enemy aesthetics. Boss designs are also stellar, although not without fault. There are a few too many bosses whose attack patterns are nearly unreadable, and the camera, it just snopes out, making the fight a chaotic screen fest. The Lawrence fight especially, I saw everything except when he was actually about to hit me. The healing system also loses point in my opinion. Sure, you can hoard a ton of blood vials in your inventory, but you can upgrade them. Yes, the game has a vampire mechanic I mentioned earlier, but against certain bosses like the Orphan of Kos, it's completely useless. You can't really trade blows with that guy, every hit is practically a one-shot for you. And I can totally see the frustration when you're bashing your head against a tough boss for dozens of tries, only to run out of healing items and have to go grind mobs just to stock back up. That's not a good time. I also didn't cover a major chunk of content, the Chalice dungeons. These are basically the labyrinths of the Pthumerians, where you can go toe-to-toe with the OGs themselves. Honestly, they didn't really grab me. There is one achievement tied to beating Queen Yharnam that is inside of those dungeons, but that means diving deep in the Chalice system, which I am not super eager to do at this moment. It's such a massive block of content that if Sony sold it as a separate DLC in 2025, I wouldn't even be surprised. Another downside? The game's technical state. I'm sorry, but the frame drops down to 15 FPS on so-called next-gen console in a 10-year-old game, well, that's just not acceptable. If Sony ever decided to release a remaster or even a remake, I'll be the first in line, both hands up. So, to answer the big question, was this game worth buying a console for? Does it live up to the hype? And the answer to both is absolutely. Well, it's far from perfect. Some of its design choices are downright baffling, but the aesthetic, the bosses, the lore, they more than make up for the flaws. Huge thanks to you if you made it this far into the video. I've spent a ton of time and energy into writing the script and editing everything together. So if you drop a like, I will be insanely grateful to you. And if you enjoy this kind of content I make, maybe you consider tapping the subscribe button below. It takes you a second, but it gives me a massive motivation to keep making videos like this in the future. No matter when you stumbled upon this video, know this, I'm already working on the next one. And if this somehow ends up being the last time you ever hear my voice, well, thank you for spending your time here. Once again, thank you for watching. See you soon.